All right, we'll go ahead and get rolling here. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today to talk about what it's like to live a day in the life of an incident responder. Um, I'll go ahead and start with my introduction, who I am. I'm keyboard. I have multiple keyboards here, and I just hit the wrong one. Um, so I'm Corey, Vice President of Security Services here at RedHelm. I run our digital forensics and incident response team. I've done digital forensics and incident response myself, as well as our Security Operations Center, or MDR, our security engineering team, etc. So that's who I am, and that's my experience. And I'll pass it over to Susan for her intro.
Well, thank you, Corey. Hi, I'm Susan Hummelbaugh. I'm the claims team lead at EHD Insurance. I have been working at EHD for 7 years, and I am the only person handling cyber claims for our clients.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan.
Sure.
All right, so kind of jumping into it, one of the first questions that we wanted to talk through was, well, why are we talking about this? Why am I a target? Whoops, going too fast. Why am I a target? Why does this matter to me? As it says up there, large businesses make headlines. Small and medium businesses don't really make any headlines. So, I'll pass it over to you, Susan, for your first thoughts on this slide.
Thanks, Corey. So one of the most common misconceptions we hear from our clients is just that my business is too small. Hackers won't bother with us. But in reality, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. No one is immune from this. At some point, every individual and every business will likely fall victim to some sort of cyber event, whether it be having your personal confidential information exposed to your entire computer system being hacked. So here is something, and I'm sorry, my mouse is being very difficult. Here's something that I typically ask my clients when discussing cyber insurance or cyber claims is, have you considered that cyber criminals are not patiently breaking into computer systems one at a time? Typically, they don't have an answer to that question. The answer to that question is that they are casting very wide nets, launching numerous attacks at one time. For a small to medium business, the risk isn't about size, it's about volume. 10 smaller cyber events, cyber claims can add up to the same cost or potentially more of one massive breach. So I was having lunch with a producer about a year ago, and I heard the greatest question that I've ever heard from a producer. He was doing a cyber insurance pitch, and the client kind of brushed him off with the same attitude, this isn't a big deal for me. It's not going to happen to me. And my producer took a pause and looked him straight in the eye and said, do you have a plan in place if a cyber event shuts your business down and you cannot continue daily operations? And all of a sudden, the client went silent because it was something they've never considered before. And unfortunately, this risk is not hypothetical. In 2024, small and medium businesses were polled and were asked a very sobering question. How much money would it take for a cyber event to shut them down permanently? And I've asked this of my coworkers just as a guess, and they've all been shocked that 55% of those polls advised it would only take somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 for it to completely close their business. On average, it takes about $120,000 for a small and medium business to recover from a cyber event. The average cost for an insurance company, because, we certainly understand times are hard and the economy isn't that great. And, so we're always careful when we're, trying to place more policies. But, because we know the bottom line is cost of premiums and whatever, but the average cost of a cyber claim for insurance companies is $100,000 per claim. And for a ransom claim, the average cost for an insurance company is typically 10 times whatever the ransom amount is. So I will throw that back to you, Corey.
Yeah, so thank you, Susan.
Yep.
That's a lot of really fantastic information, by the way. Also, I would kind of add in something else. Cyber criminals have evolved. It's not
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of people have thought of. You know, we think of, I mean, seriously, I do sit in a basement with a hoodie on. It's not for that reason. But people still have that opinion that it's some kid in a basement with a hoodie on. This isn't an individual anymore. This is groups, and they're spread throughout the world. And these groups have gotten really good at what they do, and they've even specialized. So something like something that was really, I mean, I find it interesting whenever I found out about this and was really kind of digging into this many years ago and saw this trend happening. There are threat actor groups that do nothing but figure out how to compromise organizations. And as Susan said, it's a wide cast net stance. They're not trying to just go after one business. They're seeing, hey, I created this new 0 day. I'm going to hit every organization I can with it. I'm going to compromise them, and then I'm not going to do anything with it other than to take that and broker it and sell it to another threat actor group that specializes in ransomware, right? So we're seeing all of these different things, and they're dividing it up almost as if it's different businesses, right? And they specialize into different areas. So that is probably one of the big changes that we saw. This was probably like 4 or 5, 6 years ago, was whenever they started to break these things up and specialize into areas. And at that point in time, yes, I will not discount there are targeted attacks against different organizations for various reasons, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's through political, whether it's through, the space that you're in because of your maybe they're targeting your customers and they think you're the easy way in. Whatever it is. But also, one other thing I want to bring up is a lot of times I'm not seeing as much in the targeted side of the fence as I am seeing wide cast, because a lot of the times enterprises have a really big budget, medium businesses have a smaller budget, and smaller businesses have a smaller budget for cybersecurity. So whenever you have these wide cast net things, sure, they're going to be less likely to affect a enterprise. They do. They do. Do not get me wrong. They will. But a lot of times, really what they're going to hit the most of, or the majority of, is small and medium businesses. So just to kind of drive that home a little bit more, that's really the trend we see. A big focus change has been more of the more I can compromise, the more money I can make. Because if they're just brokering that sale of access, they don't care who you are, how big or small your business is. The only thing they care about in that moment is to compromise you and then sell that access to the next threat actor. So, anything to add there before we move on?
Yeah, Corey. So, just to kind of reiterate your point, on the insurance side of it, honestly, I very rarely, I see here and there a few larger cyber events, larger companies, whatever, but, basically the majority of what I see are small and medium businesses. And to your point, I think part of the reason there's such a target is because you tend to find less cybersecurity with a small or medium business. I've had some clients who have literally had no security whatsoever get hit with a cyber
Yep,
attack. So it's easier, it's less time consuming for the threat actor.
correct. 100%. All right. So let's talk about how does a breach begin? I'll let Susan give her thoughts here on this one first too.
Well, yeah, how about you take how does a breach begin and
Sure.
then I'll jump in with after the breach happens.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how does a breach begin? It's a variety. It is, there's not one line, one direct thing. Otherwise, we'd probably have it solved, to be honest. A lot of it is still phishing. Phishing is a really common one,
Mm-hmm.
meaning whether it's through an email, a text, a phone call, any form of social engineering is a really big bucket that we're still seeing a lot of, I'll say, threat actor success from. We're also seeing 0 days. We're seeing, hey, this vulnerability and what we've seen the trend for most recently has been a focus on VPNs. So you're going to see a lot of marketing around we need to go away from VPNs, but they're targeting VPNs because at the end of the day, that puts them onto your network, right? And then other places that they're focusing on is consolidation points. So, for example, they're going to focus in on anything that gives them wide, quick, fast access. So I'm seeing a lot of RMM tools being targeted and things of that nature. So at the end of the day, it's a combination of things like 0 days. A 0 day is just qualifying that real quick. A 0 day is just a vulnerability that somebody discovered that hasn't been made known to that vendor, and that vendor doesn't have a patch for. They don't know that it exists quite yet. That's really what a 0 day is. And we're also seeing a trend of whenever a security patch comes out, threat actors are jumping on that to develop malware for that because they know it takes time to roll those patches out. So they're trying to get in to an environment before that patch or fix or mitigation is rolled out in that environment. So that's really how we are seeing the bulk majority of threats, or I'm sorry, incidents really begin. And then I'll pass it over to Susan for what happens after the breach.
Sure. So on the insurance side, it really the first 24, 48 hours is the most important time as far as the insurance goes. And, what I tell my producers to tell our clients when they're out there is if you have a cyber event of any kind, yes, if you have an internal IT department or you have an IT vendor, absolutely call them, but make your broker the second call. Because then your broker can walk with you through the process. And, for those of you not aware, cyber claims are not quick. Depending on the claim, depending on how big it is, you know, it can take anywhere, even your smallest cyber claims, you're looking at maybe 3 months, 4 months. I've had ones that have taken 2 years. So it's not a quick process. So first of all, it's important to let your broker know right away because they will need to report the claim for you. And typically what I do, we have different ways to report claims, but we call these claims in and we have them escalated. Because we don't, especially with ransomware, something that shuts you down, we don't want our insured to be sitting around waiting for somebody to call. So we make sure it gets escalated. Once it gets escalated, what happens is it goes to a breach coach. And that's typically just a lawyer from a law firm that specializes in cyber claims. They will have the first initial call with my client, and then based on whatever information is available, the insured has been able to provide, they'll determine what the next steps are. And I will tell you, 99% of the time, it's going to be a forensic investigation. So it's really important to make sure your broker is aware and is basically holding your hand through the entire process because it's long and it's hard. And it can be confusing if you're not familiar with insurance, you're not familiar with cyber in general or whatever. Something else to be aware of, just since we're here, be aware before a cyber event of your coverages, of your limits, and most importantly, every single insurance provider out there requires their policyholders to use approved vendors, approved breach coaches, approved forensic teams, notification teams. If you go outside of that approved list, you could either lose coverage 100% or it can be slashed in half. But you're not going to get the full weight of the policy limit if you are not using approved vendors, which a breach coach is fully aware of and will be able to direct you to the right people. But it's just important for you guys to be aware if you have cyber coverage, cyber insurance, to be aware of what coverages you have, what limits you have, and who your approved vendors are. And if you need any help, go to your broker. They should be able to walk you through the coverages, what they mean, what, because a lot of times with cyber claims, multiple coverages can apply. So, any broker should be able to walk you through that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Susan. And so
Yep.
just one thing to kick, I'm going to take a step back because I typically am really bad about this. I throw terms out there and you threw out a term of forensics and we've
Yep.
talked about incident response and we've talked
Yeah.
about a breach. Let's take a moment and kind of define those terms for everyone here. So forensics is if you want to think about the physical world and maybe, you could think of like CSI, the TV show, they walk around, their forensics investigators come in and take pictures of the crime scene. Forensics is whenever we're going to come in and take images of the hard drives, and then we're going to take those back and process them and analyze them for evidence of what the threat actors did while they were in there. That could include things like data exfiltration. That could include who they are, what the threat actor actually is, and try and attribute it to them, and things of that nature. So that's forensics. Defining out a breach. What is a breach? What is incident response? A breach is whenever, well, you could have a single machine. You could have all of your machines compromised by a unauthorized user or an unauthorized person or an unauthorized group. That's really what a breach is defined as. So it's a wide bucket. Whenever you get into the minutia of that, there are legal ramifications for calling something an event versus an incident. That's really going to be more siloed towards the different, I'll say, verticals you may live in. If you're in healthcare, for example, it's going to have a different effect and a legal obligation whenever you say, I'm having an incident. So a lot of times your breach coach, as Susan brought up, is also going to help you navigate those terms, what you should be saying, how you should be saying it, and which ones we're using and why. So during that flurry of kind of chaos, just know that that breach coach is also going to be there to assist you with a lot of those things. And as a group, we're all here to really help you understand and identify what those terms mean, what their role and responsibility in this process is, and how it's really going to help you ultimately get your business back up and running, right? So anything to add there, Susan?
No, I think you covered it all. And I do the same thing. You just start talking and forget to define things.
Yep. Yep. So I'm trying. So what else does a threat actor gather if a single endpoint is compromised? This one is this is the like my favorite answer is it depends, right? It always depends. Well, if it's just a regular everyday user and they are using SaaS-based cloud apps and they have no local data on their computer and their email gets compromised, well, that might not be that big of a deal. They might have the threat actor has access to some of your emails. Obviously, you might want to do forensics there, figure out what they had access to and what they did with that. Did they just use that access to send more emails to try and compromise more people? Is that what they did? Or did they try and pillage that email account for other information and try to use that to either, all kinds of fun stuff, blackmail you or what have you. So that's really what it's going to come down to. Or if they compromise, say, your CEO, that's going to be a game changer. That's a bit of a different scenario because your CEO may have access to different sets of information. So what does a threat actor gather if they compromise a single endpoint? It comes down to the endpoint, what it is, what data exists on that, and that will determine based around the criticality of the information on that to your business, what that means to you as an organization.
Hey, Corey, do you want to explain what an endpoint is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So an
Mm.
endpoint would be any device that could be a workstation, that could be a server, that could be a point of sales device, that could be a machine inside of a parking lot that has one role and responsibility, and that is to open a door using a PLC. An endpoint is that end device in your environment that contains information that users may or may not interact with on a day-to-day basis that a threat actor has taken over, or gained access to that's unauthorized or has dropped malware onto.
It can be as simple as a cell phone. Isn't that correct, Corey?
Absolutely. Could be your cell phone. It could be a laptop, like I said, could be a server, could be, anything in your environment that contains business level information that's a digital asset.
Unfortunately, nowadays, most people have their emails, they have all sorts of things on their personal phone from
Yep.
work.
That's correct.
Guilty of that myself.
Yep. So that's kind of that's a minutia answer, but that's really where we start to talk about why the importance of in-depth security is a huge piece. Not just for around awareness, but you want to layer in different tactics throughout, from endpoints to endpoints, how endpoints are allowed to interact with other endpoints, how things on your network talk, how they shouldn't talk, and layering in all those things to start your in-depth security piece. But also, as I said a little bit earlier, how does a breach begin? It's a lot of those begin with phishing, with engineering. So a huge piece here is security awareness and educating your users on what they should see, what they should expect, and then building policies and procedures around things that happen on the day to day. For example, I remember I was intricately involved in an IR that happened a little while ago, like 8 years ago. But there was an end user, all they do all day was Western Union money. They just literally send money, Western Union. And their CEO called them and said, I need money. I want you to Western Union from here to here. And they did their job, right? And what was crazy is it wasn't their CEO. It's not so crazy. We hear about this all the time. But my point there is adding in another step of verification to that. If it's just an email, make a phone call. If it's just an email, you need that second level of verification to ensure the person you're talking to on the other end is appropriate. If it's just a text message, pick up your phone and call. Usually we want to have a phone call verification. Obviously, things are coming in our future like AI deepfakes and things of that nature. So
Yep.
you need to make sure whatever that process is, that you're verifying with what you know is a good phone number, right? They're not calling you. You don't get an email and that says, give me this money right now, or wire transfer this money right now. And then you get a phone call that says that to you, make from some unknown number. Make sure you're calling the known number and that is your process, or whatever that process looks like.
And to your point, Corey, just to add, for those of you that have cyber policies or are considering obtaining cyber policies, insurance companies are now requiring, in that exact example, they call it a change in direction of pay, possibly. Insurance companies are requiring, when somebody is asking you to change the direction of pay or to pay something you normally wouldn't pay, or they come to you and you're not really the person that normally does that, the policy requires you, in most cases, to check with two different management people and then to specifically call the person who is requesting this money, or
Yep.
that are requesting you to move this money or pay this money or whatever. Failure to do that will knock out the insurance coverage. So it's getting to be a big problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to pop the poll question up there. You're going to see this poll pop up. Does your organization have cyber liability insurance? Go ahead and answer that if you do not mind, and we'll circle back to those here in a bit. All right. Well, that's popping up for me too.
I know, me too.
Yeah. So detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and forensics. There's a whole bucket of terms there. Detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and forensics. It's really fun to say if you say it 5 times fast. But what does that mean to your organization? Ultimately, detection analysis is exactly what it sounds like. What happens whenever you have that IR? You're going to pick up the phone and probably call whoever your IT person internally is, or whoever that point of contact is, and be like, what do we do? And then hopefully you have an IRP, an IR incident response policy. Hopefully you're going to go right down the line of the list of things to take off for. And then you're going to call cyber liability insurance. You're going to get them involved. Eventually, a cyber team is going to be involved to do these things. And these things are really, detection analysis is what's happening. What is going on in your environment? What is compromised? What isn't compromised? Do you have clean state? Do you have clean slate? Do you not have any of those things? Is everything compromised? Is your whole environment encrypted? If that's the case, what's going on with your backups? Do we have recovery points and all of those fun things? So detection analysis is really just that kind of barrier to entry. What's going on? What's happening? How widespread is this? How bad is it? And then from there, you would be kind of taking that next step of containment. Containment and eradication typically go kind of hand in hand. Kind of the way most firms will do it, it kind of goes hand in hand. So you may have to deploy a solution like an EDR solution or something along those lines, depending on what you already have deployed or what you don't have deployed, or whether that vendor works with that solution or not, and all of the fun caveats that go along with that. But you may have to deploy a solution, and at which time that solution would be used. Typically an EDR solution, an endpoint detection and response solution. EDRs are, I won't get into brands, but there's all kinds of different brands of EDR solutions out there. But basically that would be, again, typically used to do the containment. And then from there, you'd be eradicating the threat. Now, containment is going to be more of isolating, making sure that we know how widespread the threat is, kind of dipping its toe from that data or detection analysis over into the containment. And then really, we understand now what's compromised. Let's stop them from being able to talk to one another. And then eradication is kind of that next step in the chain to let's remove the threat. Now, removing the threat, that could be re-imaging machines. That could be going to backups. That could even be using that EDR to literally rip the malware off of all those devices. It varies by every situation. There's not like a direct line of, hey, this is what happens every time. It's more like, think of them more as kind of buckets and stages of how this plays out. And then forensics. Forensics isn't last. I know it's last in the list. But remember what I said going back to that physical analogy of, you think CSI, like that show. I didn't watch that show. I don't know why I keep using it, but it's a really good way to think about this. You have these investigators come in and start taking pictures of the crime scene. Well, think about it this way. What if police officers just walked in and started kicking stuff around and stepping on stuff, and they're not preserving the evidence first? That's really what forensics is. You're trying to preserve the evidence to make sure you have a very good understanding and a picture of exactly everything that has happened. Now, forensics is kind of pitched a lot of times as I'll call it a silver bullet. Forensics is only as good as the information that's available. So if a device is encrypted and there's no ability to decrypt that device, there's no forensics to really gather from some of those devices. Even though I say that, there's still a lot of evidence kind of spewed all over the place that you can gather. And there's still a lot of parts to the puzzle that you can piece together. If the data is there, forensics is really good at piecing together what happened, how it happened, and it also kind of rolls back into that detection analysis, containment, and eradication piece, because they may find things in forensics that wasn't found during detection analysis, that wasn't considered for containment, that wasn't considered for eradication, that now you can, again, you have those tools kind of deployed out there. You're going back and then, tackling that again. So saw Susan come off mute.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I found, and it's unfortunate, in what I do is sometimes insurance is the last thing people think about during any kind of cyber incident. And I've actually had clients who 6 months later decide to let us know about, whatever has occurred. Typically with ransomware, we always know right away, but other situations, I've had a couple cases where it was 5 months, 6 months. I even had one that was 9 months later. And from what I can understand, and Corey, please correct me if I'm wrong, the further away it gets, the harder it is for forensics to find what they're looking for.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, sometimes time is so sensitive. We've landed in environments where a firewall was literally turning its logs over in minutes. So for every minute that we did not start that investigation, it was logs that were disappearing, and they only had, a few hours worth of logs in there. And once those logs are gone, we had no visibility. So absolutely to your point, Susan, yes, it is. That's why that becomes so critical.
Yep.
All right, we'll pop the next poll question up here. Does your organization have a formalized incident response plan? This is one of my favorite questions actually to ask. And we're actually going to dig into those while you guys answer that question. This kind of goes back to that preparation, how prepared are you? And whenever you think of an IRP or an incident response policy, like the key components there is do you know your internal processes? Do you know who your key organizational key stakeholders are? Who should you be communicating with? Let's say you walk in tomorrow and your whole entire environment is encrypted and down. Who do you talk to? What happens if the news finds out? Who talks to the news? Who does these things? And some of that stuff, actually, Susan is probably going to have a better answer for you than what you may have in your incident response policy, because what it should say is call my cyber liability insurance firm, who's going to get their, the legal involved, the appropriate legal folks, and your advisor and coach. So at the end of the day, like really, what you need to focus on: who are your key stakeholders? Uh, do you have their phone numbers listed somewhere? Is this policy in a place that is not on your network that you can all get to? Because if everything in your network's encrypted, you can't get to your IRP. You're just gonna be like, oh crap, well, it's there. I had it, right? Like, what do I do now? So documenting who you call. Another big thing that people don't think about until they're in the middle of an incident is I always call it out of band communications. How are you communicating? Because if your network is compromised, you can't use your network. You can't use your email. You can't use these things that you're used to. You can't use Slack or Teams or whatever it is in your network if it's compromised. What are your out of band communications? Typically, the easy answer to that is cell phones. And again, typically your incident response team, the group that's helping you, including cyber liability insurance, is going to bring their own out of band communications, like platforms for you to use. And it could be their Teams, it could be their Slack, it could be Zoom, it could be whatever. But you're going to have that. But even while you're getting that started up, you have to be cognizant and think, hey, how are we going to start this up without alerting the threat actor that we know that they're in there, right? Because the last thing you want to do, if you're realizing you're compromised and they haven't done anything like encryption, is alert them that you're about to get an insurance provider involved and an incident response team involved who's going to kick them out. Because remember, if they don't drop their payload, they don't get paid at the end of the day. Anything to add there, Susan?
Absolutely, Corey. So, couple things I wanted to talk about, and it's one of the first things after reporting the claim, after the breach coach call, all of that. One of the first things I talk to my insured about is if they still have access to email, but they're not completely shut down, but they still have access to email. Don't talk about insurance on emails, because what the threat actor might want from you at the beginning might be entirely different if you start talking about insurance limits. They find out you have $1 million insurance limit, all of a sudden, they're going to obviously raise the amount they want. Something else to think about, and I can honestly tell you that not one of my clients has ever considered it until they were faced with the question. In your incident response plan, do you have, if you're completely shut down, can't continue operations, do you have an idea of what you're going to do with your employees? Are you going to continue paying them for not working? Are you going to have them come in and not work and pay them? Are you going to not pay them at all and risk losing them? That is something that not one of my clients has ever considered until they were faced with the question. So it's definitely something that you want to talk about with management and, make a plan. Who are the essential people in your organization? One of the things that I have a cyber claim right now, it's a ransomware claim. And my client kept all the essential people, kept the people they didn't want to lose, and were paying them, and basically sent the ones home that, they didn't want to lose, but if they did, wouldn't be a big hit to the organization. So that's definitely something you want to consider.
Absolutely fantastic point. I appreciate that one. That's a really, really good point. One note, just a note, house cleaning real quick. If you have any questions as we go along, please toss them into the chat. And we'll circle back to those during the Q&A section. So organizing the recovery strategy from here on out, right? So obviously the way this would work is you've involved your cyber liability. You now have a forensics team in there. They're assisting. What happens whenever it comes to recovery? Well, that's actually, from my experience, from a business perspective, right? So there's the time for the insurance claim, there's time for everything else, but really the a key component from business owners to a lot of times my team, whenever we're involved, is how quickly can we get back into business, right? So going back to what Susan just said, which is, do I have my employees come in today? Well, maybe it's only 2 days you don't have them come in. Maybe it's only those 2 days because maybe this happened over a weekend. Maybe you got everybody involved over the weekend and Monday, okay, we're not there yet. Tuesday, we're not quite there yet. Wednesday, we're going to have everybody come back in. That's going to be the plan, right? So, kind of thinking through that and what that coordination looks like, because until you get hit by an incident, until there are a lot of qualifications. We've had situations where you've had clean backups and we were able to have that customer back up. It happened on a weekend. They were back up over the weekend. Business really didn't, I'll say, stop for them, right? Like it did, but by Monday morning when they needed full production again, they were back in full production. We've had others where their backups were completely encrypted as well. There was no recovery points and we literally rebuilt from scratch. So understanding kind of what you're up against, what that recovery time frame is going to be is also going to kind of play into what Susan was talking about as well.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind me adding, Corey, the one I'm dealing with now, their last backup was 6 months prior to the loss, which causes problems.
Yeah.
Because when you are talking about cyber insurance, what gets weighed in what the steps are taken, are, does it financially make sense to start from scratch and, basically rebuild the system, or does it make sense to pay the ransom? Well,
Right.
in any given situation, the answer could be different. And in this particular case, being 6 months since last backup, paying the ransom was the way to go.
Yep.
So something to think about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now we're going to talk about some post-incident activity. So you get through recovery, you're back up, you're running. That's it, right? Like you're done. Well, not exactly. So typically from our side of the fence on the technical side, there's going to be an array of things and decisions to be made, right? So you're going to have forensics analysis kind of pointing out a lot of the holes that they saw, ways that the threat actor ran across your environment, how they kind of moved throughout, all that fun stuff. So you're going to get basically from the technical side a list of recommendations on how you can improve moving forward. You also will have probably technology that was deployed during that time period, and that technology is going to have an expiration to it. You're going to have to either decide, do I want to keep it? Do I not want to keep it? Do I want to have somebody else monitor it? Or are we going to assume it? You're going to have a whole bunch of kind of technical decisions to make there too. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of technical or non-technical decisions on the insurance side too. And then the key component here, while I don't want to kind of gloss over monitoring mode and all those other things that happen, I think the biggest key for me that I've seen organizations fail at is that top right box where it says lessons learned. This is an opportunity for an organization that just came through a really bad situation to learn from that really bad situation. And I like first to say it here, I don't think it's the business's fault in a lot of these instances that they got compromised, right? Like threat actors are aggressive. They live and die on this, right? But if you don't take those lessons that you're receiving throughout that process seriously, what I can tell you is I won't even say almost. I'm pretty sure it's every single organization that I've ever worked with that didn't take the lessons learned seriously ended up having another breach within 6 months. So because threat actors, they don't forget about you. You basically are now in their list of known compromised, and you're just going to stay in that list now forever. So just to expect that threat actor is always going to continuously to knock on your door because you might be a repeat customer for them. So
And that actually happens more than most people think. I have one client who was hit 5 times in a year and a half.
yep,
So
exactly. So IOCs, I just quick kind of what that is. I know I'm kind of jumping around at this point, but an IOC is just an indicator of compromise. That is, we saw that through forensics, we saw that through data analysis, we saw that through something, some measure. All an IOC is, or an indicator of compromise, is just exactly what it sounds like. It's an indicator of compromise. It is a file, it is a registry entry, it is a name, it is something that says we know that that was for sure put there by an unauthorized threat actor. That's what that is. And then we use that in our tools to hunt across your environment. And then those IOCs actually go back into for like services and stuff for us. And that kind of delves into threat hunting, which is for a different call. But that's what those IOCs are really used for. And that's why it's there. We would take that and figure out exactly how the threat actors got in, what they used. Now, a key component to the lessons learned, and something I also want to point out, is whenever you get those lessons learned, it's not every problem in your environment. It is the problems that were seen during this individual instance and incident. There might be stuff that happens outside of that that is kind of gathered and collected as kind of a byproduct of that. But those lessons learned, you absolutely need to take them seriously. But that's the beginning. That's like chapter 1 of the book. That's your introduction, right? You need to take those seriously and then figure out what the next steps after that will be and how you're going to take that next step and become even more serious moving forward. So we'll toss out this poll real quick. Do all your key stakeholders know what to do or who to call when an incident happens? That's a really fun question that I like. All right, so we're coming up with 3 minutes left in this, so I'll kind of swing over onto this slide and then we'll flip over and see if anybody has any questions, which I haven't seen any so far. But why is security an organization-wide effort? This goes back to security awareness training. This goes back to every user in your organization. They need to have some awareness, right? And this, we used to say, let's gamify this, let's make it fun. I will say, from my standpoint, in all of my experiences, if you're expecting your user base to, kind of discover phishing attempts, and if they don't, and you do all this training, and then you kind of stick and carrot, right? If you're always giving them the stick every time they have a miss, I see that those campaigns are typically less successful in organizations. Where I see it be more successful is kind of gamifying it, making it fun, making it an adventure. Like, who's the first one to capture that phishing engagement? Whenever you do that, and I won't tell you kind of how to do that, but we've seen things like gift cards, like a small gift card or something to the first person that identifies that phishing assessment. People will get good at that. People will kind of enjoy it. And it also bridges that gap between whoever is doing your security and your regular everyday folks. It kind of breaks down that barrier and brings them together instead of kind of being against each other. Traditionally, they're kind of against each other. Like, security is always trying to find me doing something bad or whatever. We're not. Surprise, man behind the curtain. We're not. But kind of breaking down those walls. And also another thing here that you can do is bringing in, whether that's somebody internal or someone like Susan, someone like myself, to come in and talk about previous situations that we've seen and kind of walk through that, because there's some pretty cool stuff. We have a guy on our offensive side of the team. We had a sales kickoff, and he was staying at a hotel, and he literally made a video of how he could clone the badges for the hotel and walk down literally walk down the hall and could open up any door. So like, whenever you get into that, security awareness is really great, but it's always about ratcheting that up and going to that next level. So anything to add there, Susan?
I was just going to say, one of the things that we talk about a lot on our end is just be careful. It's as simple as that. When are we the most vulnerable? When we're busy. We're trying to get through emails. We're trying to knock things out so we don't have 150 emails when we leave the day. We've got a cyber presentation, and we've got this and we've got that, and we're just overwhelmed. And that is when the mistakes happen. That is when you click on a link you shouldn't. You miss something that should have stood out. Sometimes just slowing down can prevent. I mean, it's not the foolproof way to prevent any kind of cyber thing, but it certainly helps in prevention.
Yep, absolutely. absolutely. Skip through a couple slides. That's okay. And thank you for that information, Susan. Absolutely hit the nail on the head. So walk away items here, just to kind of regurgitate some high level points. The incident response plan is a very key component. Talk to your cyber insurance provider about it. Talk to, whoever, talk to outside entities, service providers like us, whatever your comfort level is, and build that. It doesn't even have to be something you go out and pay somebody for, but even googling it and getting your like the ball rolling on that, just so who do I call, what do I do in this scenario. And then for executives and C levels, what you should be thinking about is everybody's a target nowadays. What are you doing to help mitigate that risk for your organization? Do you have the right policies and procedures in place? Do you have that IRP? Do you have these things that, you can implement today? You don't need, you can, somebody can figure it out, right? Like, who do I call? What do I do? Who are our key stakeholders in this organization, et cetera? And then really starting to focus in on everyone being a part of the security team. Anything to add there, Susan?
Yeah, just again, be aware of your policy, be aware of your limits, and if you have a questions, go to your broker. Your broker should be able to walk you through the policy, what coverages you have, what limitations, what exclusions. It's important to know before the event rather than trying to catch up after.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, I don't see any Q&A in there, so we'll just wrap it here. I just want to say thank you to everyone. We appreciate your time today and hanging in
Yep.
there with us. If you don't mind, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to have another webinar coming up in December. You'll see an announcement there. And Susan, I really appreciate you jumping on and helping us out with
Oh,
this one. It was a great talk.
absolutely. I enjoyed myself.
Me too.
Oh, it looks like there is a question.
Oh, did I miss the question? I did just say like and subscribe. Yes, I did. And do you have any templates? Question. Do you have any recommendation for any templates for an IR plan?
Good
I could
question.
probably help you out with that. Let's link up after that. After this call, shoot me an email and I'll help you out with that. That's definitely something that I mean we have our own internal one and we can share even that out as a framework. So absolutely,
It's a good question.
it is. Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.